This is a Bugatti. It is $2 million all the way up to a whopping $18 million. But can we build the Bugatti using scraps that we find in this junkyard? Let's find out.
This is me. And a little over a year ago, I was scrolling job postings when I met Steven and took on the most stressful job of my entire life. With over 5 months of work, countless 12-hour days, and over $100,000 in budget. My name's Omar, and this is the truth behind Steven Song's Bugatti build. Disclaimer. I want to start off by saying this is not an exposed video, and I am not shitting on Steven Song. I hold no bad feelings towards Steven Song personally or professionally, and honestly, I wish him all the best. In fact, even though this was the most stressful project in my entire life, I am still grateful that I was given the opportunity to participate on something that freaking cool, you know? Considering I had never built a Bugatti, made a YouTube video, very grateful for the opportunity, so thanks, Steven. Now, I am a little sad that I didn't get to witness the send-off to the Bugatti, and we'll get into that later in the video. Anyways, Steven, if you're watching this, I wish you all the best, and I'm sorry for your loss. All right, with that out of the way, now I've wanted to make this video for quite some time, and to be honest, you know, when the Bugatti got destroyed, that was it for me. You know, I kind of making this video because it's like my send-off. I've always wanted to make like a more behind the scenes, like a technical breakdown on what we did and how and why and that kind of stuff. We were creating a Mr. Beast type video. So think of this like the engineers that accompany Mr. Beast, and then, you know, build the Squid Game set and talk about, you know, all the billion boards that they use, whatever. So yeah, this is kind of like that. This is going to be my personal journey and a technical, you know, breakdown, analysis, whatever you want to call it, of the entire build process. So buckle up and enjoy the ride, because this is going to be a long one. Warning, 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 warning. Like I said, this is not an exposed video, but some of what I am about to reveal in this video will break the illusion of the Steven Song video. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not sure why you clicked on this or how you're watching this video. Go watch Steven's video and then come back here, because this is like a direct, yeah, you get the point. This is like a fancy react video. Now I'll be showing, you know, clips and whenever it makes sense, or whenever there's something I need to like comment on directly. But for the most part, I think I'm just going to be talking to you and showing information there. So yeah, so there's 5 months of content, all right? So it's a bit hard to keep everything condensed. My future editor self is going to create this timeline right here somewhere. Thank you. Everything that I'm about to talk about is going to be from the very beginning, from the moment I saw the job posting up until, you know, I'll call the first frame of the Steven Song video, which is like in the junkyard. Now, this all started in April of 2023 when I was scrolling job postings like I usually do, and I've stumbled across this strange post, to say the least. And keep in mind, this was in a film industry type section. I'm producing a video for a large YouTube channel, and I'm looking for an automotive fabricator in or near Toronto. The ideal candidate will have their own tools, shop, workspace, and will know a little about everything: metal fabrication, welding, fiberglass, basic electronics, headlights, etc. The vibe of this build is very much on the DIY, quick and dirty, weekend warrior style. If you're one of the 18 subscribers on my channel, or if you've seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I put the Y in DIY, and I'm definitely a weekend warrior.
Look at that. I feel like I'm getting burned. Ow! I'm an idiot.
So something about this post kind of spoke to me. Another thing you might have noticed if you're one of my 18 subscribers is this guy. Brandon is a heavy-duty mechanic, and he is known for having comically large tools, but that's besides the point. Now, Brandon's going to be a reoccurring character, so we're going to take Brandon's face and we're going to put it up there. Everybody who's like a reoccurring important character, we're going to put their face up there, kind of refer back to them. So Brandon, mechanic, friend, weekend warrior. After I saw this post, I spoke to Brandon, and even though he was skeptical, I kind of was like, let's just get more information, got his initial approval, and went ahead, sent a message. And then I got the title of the video: I built a Bugatti from scratch. Now, as you can imagine, when I went back to Brandon and I was like, I built a Bugatti from scratch, he was like, oh hell no. However, I was still very invested. I was like, okay, Brandon, we can pretty much do a lot of stuff, right? We could do electronic, paint, welding, you can do car fixing. A lot of the things and the skills that are needed, we have and can provide and can kind of figure out. The biggest issue is going to be making anything look like a Bugatti. At first, I thought about a kit car, and I was like, if we could use a kit car, that could be a good approach. So I basically went back to Liam, and he's also going to be a reoccurring character. So we're going to put his face up here. He's a videographer and was the producer. He had done a couple other videos with Steven at that point. And I don't know, fun fact, I haven't spoken to Liam since we finished this video. So yeah, I was kind of getting Brandon warmer to the idea, especially with the concept of a kit car. And then when I presented that to Liam, Liam said, we can't use a kit car. Even if we don't use a kit car, here's what we can do. And it's like everything up until, the kit car parts get installed. And if you can find someone to fabricate these parts or mold it or make clay or whatever, then they can come do that on top of what we're doing. At this point, the net TV videos were floating around, like the sculpting from clay, the ones filled with child labor and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I knew for a fact, I couldn't do that. Also, these net TV videos and whatever, they have 365-day timeline, and there's 7 children working on it at any given time. The timeline for this project was 1 month. So while it seemed a bit unrealistic, and I had no idea how body parts would be made, we basically just pitched the idea of, we would cover electronics, paint, welding, that kind of stuff, and we'd find someone else to do the rest. Liam said, that sounds good. So I started doing some more research, prepping a build proposal document. This is the build proposal breakdown section. This is arguably for me one of the coolest part of the entire build, of how we got to where we are, why was this particular car, some of the decisions we made, whatever. If you don't care and you want to just see me kind of react to the Steven video, there will be timestamps or something in the bottom that you can skip directly to that. We are still on this part of the timeline where it's everything before the shoot day. All right, now this build proposal document changes many times over the next few weeks before we actually get started on the shoot day. So I'm not really going to go through every single minor change and every single little thing here and there, but what I will do is I will go through over 3 main eras, right? Think of this I'm not much of a Swiftie, but I know about the eras, all right? So think of this 3 distinct eras that we're going to travel through. So the first era of the build proposal, what I like to call the any car era. Keep in mind, please, you can roast me in the comments all you want. I'm not an engineer. I've never made a build proposal document. I'm not even sure if that is what you're supposed to do. All right, so this document the whole time was broken down to stages, kind of similar to the video, but not really. And at this point, as the name might suggest, everything was up in the air. Some of the cars that we had on the list were Infiniti G35, a Kia Forte Coupe, Nissan Altima Coupe, a Honda Accord Coupe, all the coupe, Acura RSX, but not a coupe. Any kind of 2-door car that is relatively cheap and was made in the early 2000s, that's kind of what we were looking for. On the document, this was referred to as stage 0.5, the car. Moving on, stage 1 in the document was labeled Teardown, and this doesn't really change throughout all the iterations and all the different eras of this document. This is basically where we were supposed to take the car from its purchased condition and then into what you see in the video, that torn down aesthetic. The estimate was pretty accurate in terms of time, cost, and budget on that stage. Estimated 40 to 60 hours. I think we ended up doing 60. That was including moving into the warehouse and a couple other things. For all future iterations and eras of this document, I'm going to skip over this stage from now on. Stage 2 was labeled the cage in this era of the document. Now this does drastically change later and has multiple other things get added to it, but we'll talk about that later. During the any car era, the cage was supposed to be built from new steel, which was estimated on there. So just going to buy new steel from the steel store and then build the cage from it. The specs of the cage and that kind of stuff, that was going to depend a little bit on what's going to come later with the body. We can kind of estimate what it's going to look like based on the net TV videos. And there's also a point where they drive that exoskeleton. So that was a big scene that had to be recorded. Okay, moving on. Stage 3, the body. Now this always kind of just said TBD or whatever. I was hoping that whoever would sign on to do the rest of that work would kind of fill in this section and add their estimate. But more on that later. Stage 4. Pimp my ride. Now, similar to the Teardown, this doesn't really change throughout the different eras of the document. It was also relatively accurate in terms of time and cost estimate, although it is kind of hard to estimate how much time it took since a lot of that work was done throughout. One of the ideas that we had early on, Pimp My Ride project, I don't know, a bar or a big speaker or something like that. There was a whole bunch of different ideas. ultimately we ended up going with nothing. But now stage 5 was paint and finish, and on there was 4 different suggestions. One was paint the car in the warehouse slash garage, just kind of weekend warrior style spray can. Option 2 was we build like a DIY paint booth. Option 3 was sending it to a paint shop. That slowly becomes less of a reality. A lot of the work we have to do ourselves so that it's filmed, and this whole like from trash or from scratch concept. And then option 4 was vinyl wrap. In hindsight, I think we should have just vinyl wrapped it. I think that would have been a lot more forgiving, especially since then I've now done a little bit of vinyl wrapping and think that we would have maybe gotten better result. You know what they say, hindsight is 20/20 always. So this last section in the document was about locations. And if you remember the job listing earlier, you remember me saying that the ideal candidate would have their own shop slash workspace. Initially, we were pitching Brandon's 2-car garage, which is about an hour away from the city. And little did they know that, a night before they came out to see it, which they came out, scouted out, Brandon and I made it presentable, for lack of a better word. It's all out now. All secrets are out. Anyways, after they came and saw it, ultimately we decided that it was too small because we needed to film a lot of 360s and stuff. And again, in hindsight, it is great that it didn't happen there. Moving on. Another option that was pitched was like a storage unit. But again, those wouldn't be big enough, even if we had gotten a 2-car one or whatever, the bigger one. Big sweeping 360s were like a big requirement of the whole project to show progress. We needed not just a spot for the car and our work, but a spot around the car. Even early on, I believe Liam brought one of these. I'll find it here. Now, ultimately, I don't think we ended up using it. I'm not sure why. Okay, camera cut out. Boom. To remind you, so many things were up in the air. We knew we had 1 month. We kind of were in talks about a place, but we didn't really have it yet. And we didn't have anybody to make the body yet. I had also not signed on. So this initial proposal was just like my pitch. So I hadn't sunk in that much time in terms of research or hours. So it's pretty bare bones, surface level stuff, kind of floating ideas around. Now fast forward to the second, and I'm on a call with Liam and Steven, which if you haven't seen the video, Steven's the YouTuber. Boom, we're going to add him up there again. Now I'm going to call with Steven and Liam, and I quickly realized that, everything that I had in my proposal, well, like still sound, but they were very much so interested in that from scratch approach. Like very much so, net TV and that kind of stuff was pushed as a reference where, yeah, I didn't really know how, but I had to go back to the drawing board and see, what we can and can't get. This is when we move into what I like to call the Firebird era. And if you don't know about Firebird, it's a car. Okay, that's it. That's why we call it the Firebird era. Now, we still didn't really have anyone on board when it came to bodywork and that kind of stuff, but Liam had started talking to someone, and more on that later. One thing that stood out to me as soon as I went back to these documents was this section, and I quote, "I'm still having a hard time trying to picture what parts we'd be able to get from a junkyard for this build. Usually, a junkyard would be great, especially while rebuilding a car. However, most of the parts we're going to use in this build will need to be purchased new to fit the Bugatti look and aesthetic. Unless we can find a junkyard with a Bugatti in it, I don't think we'll be able to get any real parts from a junkyard. Did some possible solutions. Pre-plant parts at a junkyard. Another idea was calling in favors from friends and family. Maybe my Uncle Bob down south has a Bugatti bumper or something. Who knows? And the last suggestion I provided was to start the video after the teardown process. Basically, pretending we got the car in its torn down state. Now, with all of these challenges and points that I brought up in play, Liam and Steven started to see that maybe we couldn't build this whole thing from trash. So it became a matter of what can we build from trash? So for example, all the steel immediately was like, okay, we just get rusty old steel from a junkyard and we use that instead. Try to incorporate as much trash as possible, or base ingredients like foam and clay and Bondo, and not so much like a finished panel or things like that. Like if you notice, we don't really like go into details about all the speakers that we buy and that kind of stuff. Another thing I suggested that was on the document at this point, helped sell that junkyard concept, was stage 0.75 engine swap. I never really got into why I went for a Firebird in the first place, but here's the thought process, right? At this point, a big concern was the roof line, right? So we were trying to maintain that structural roof line because then the car would be technically street legal, which was a box we were trying to check at the time. And it also had the removable roof, which I thought would be cool since we were already taking the liberty of making butterfly door Bugatti. So now why don't we make a convertible Bugatti? Moving on. One day, Liam popped in the chat and was like, Firebird Bugatti, or Fire Gotti, is going to be more like this rather than this. So the dimensionality of it is going to be slightly different. And this is mainly because most sports cars have a rear or center engine, and the Bugatti is one of them. So basically the front is kind of like condensed as opposed to like a normal car, which might have like a longer front end. One of the things we had pitched as a fix to this at some point was we would chop the front end and then move the radiator and stuff back. However, the wheelbase would still be misaligned. So that basically got us to look about it differently. And I think that was around the time where we ditched the whole street legal concept as well. So we tried to find something that was as close to the Bugatti in terms of the wheelbase. Whatever we had to do to make it dimensionally fit, we would do that, but we would start with a good wheelbase. So this sent our Firebird era bye-bye, and then we started a whole new era, and it's the G6 era. Like a G6, like a G6, na 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 na, like a G6, like a G6. Okay, I'm sorry. At this point, we were kind of pretty concrete on the G6 because the wheelbase was pretty close. According to what I could find online, we wouldn't even have to chop that much off the front as long as we just remove the bumper and stuff. It was mostly going to be about extending the back, and, you know, extending is not a problem. Liam had started talking to Yuri, and you might ask, who the fuck is Yuri? Great question. Yuri's this guy, 3D sculptor, artist, builder, whatever. He promised us the world. We went on a coffee meeting and a couple of video calls, and he's like, yeah, easy, within the timeline. He gave us the world, okay? And just a few days before the project started, he dipped out. So I'm not going to spend much time shit-talking Yuri. What we need to know is at this point, we had some kind of 3D artist that we were talking to at the time. We've entered like the final stage of the document. A couple things that you might notice right off the bat is the amount of details. Now, there's like 3 or 4 times as much content in this document as compared to like the original Any Car Era version. Obviously, I had sunk in so much more research time and that kind of stuff in this document, and a lot of things had taken shape. There was also 2 spreadsheets that accompanied the main proposal document. One was a schedule, and one had all like the parts lists and receipts and prices and that kind of stuff. Let's talk about a couple sections from the G6 era that I find pretty interesting. This windshield section. The Bugatti has this weird, kind of folded like a fortune cookie somewhat. They don't make car windshields like that. I'd looked into custom windshield options. Basically, it was possible. It would have costed us around $2,500. It was a company in Vancouver, I want to say, that was going to do it. Point is, not only was it going to cost $2,500, but they needed 6 weeks of lead time, and we just didn't have 6 weeks of total timeline. So that was out of the question. We basically ended up saying we're not going to add complexity to the build, so that's one of the things that we're going to keep the same from the G6. Okay, another thing, that was the height. Now, the Bugatti has a 4-inch clearance off the ground. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous how low it is. We were trying to lower the G6 without doing the suspension. We ended up cutting the springs. And by we, I mean Brandon. Shouts out. Thanks, bro. Okay, seats. Like I said, we were talking to Yuri. He said he was going to sculpt the interior from foam or something, but we had to do the seats. We had a bunch of options on there. I said, you know, we could buy real bucket seats, but ultimately the cheapest thing would be to just get gaming chairs, especially since we're not concerned about road safety. So getting gaming chairs attached to the same mechanism of the original chair, that's basically what we did. Okay, a couple other things that were on the document that were still in the air was the whole doors thing. At this point, we weren't really locked in on the butterfly doors, although Steven said he really wanted it, but we were also kind of in the direction of trying to make it look as close to a Bugatti dimensionally as possible. So I always thought the doors were weird. Anyways, we ultimately did end up using butterfly doors. I don't know, they were never really shown that much in the video, and they were kind of a pain in the ass, so maybe we should have kept the original? I don't know. The interior gauge versus screen debate, where the Chiron has like a bunch of gauges. We'd initially talked about maybe trying to do like a vertical screen, like a Tesla, and making that whole thing thicker, maybe like double gauge wide. And last but not least was the flamethrower, which if you've watched the video, it did make the cut. You know, let's just talk about it right now. So the flamethrower was just 2 weed killing thingies that we attached to the back. We had a Y, there's a propane tank in the back. So yeah, when he did destroy the car, there was fully like a propane tank in the back. He wasn't kidding. Here's a video of Brandon turning them on for the first time at the warehouse. All right, we covered flamethrowers. What's next? After that, there's a little section about what we can find in a junkyard and what we can use. Radiator, maybe steering wheel, rims, that kind of stuff. We tried to look, but yeah, we only found the steel, honestly. So, yeah. Back to the document structure that we had before. So, okay, this is the first thing I'm about to reveal that is not at all mentioned in the video. I am going to break the illusion with this next point. Stage 0.75, junkyard prep. Now, to sell the concept of the video and be like from trash, what we ended up doing is before it appeared at the junkyard, I had picked it up from a city nearby, drove it down to the warehouse, and I prepped it to make it look junkyard ready. So in Ontario, which is where we were, and maybe things work differently in some other places, you can't just go into a junkyard and buy a car. I'm guessing this is not like a well-known fact since there wasn't a lot of comments on this, but yeah, this is one of the things that I figured out early on that, we couldn't just go into Omar's junkyard and buy a car from there because these cars that are in the junkyard, the VIN number, whatever, like they no longer belong to anybody and you can't just like resurrect them. They're like dead. That's my understanding. Again, I'm a junkyard noob. So basically, whenever I contacted a place to get a car from them, they said, no, that's just not a thing that we do. They can do parts, they can't do cars. So this meant that we either had to get a car from someone that was, in that condition and just ditch the whole junkyard thing altogether, or we could do what we ended up doing, which plant a car in there. It would look kind of sus. This mint condition car just appears in a junkyard. So yeah, I basically made it look like it belonged there. And on the day of, we towed it from the warehouse to the recycle facility. It wasn't even a junkyard, but it does say that in the video. It says plastic recycling facility. So to circle back to our timeline, I picked up the car on the 18th. We got the keys to the place Monday, the 22nd, and then I prepped it. And then on the 25th, we were shooting that junkyard scene at the recycle facility. Shouts out to Plazic, by the way. These guys really hooked it up. Thanks. Shouts out. Okay, back to the document. Stage 2. It now says cage/auto. The door project, so we kind of locked that in. We have now the door project in. We have butterfly doors locked in. That's part of the cage work. We also have to modify the exhaust system. By exhaust modification, I just mean we straight pipe that thing. Another thing that was added in this section was the leak, which, yeah, we totally knew about ahead of time, by the way. So I picked up the car knowing that it does leak. I literally had a jug of that transmission fluid that I topped it up before I drove it back. So yeah, and we'd also known that it needed brakes, engine oil. We were doing just a couple of maintenance things. And then the electrical prep. So everything like running all the wires for Pimp My Ride was also tacked on to this stage. The rest of the document, honestly, from this point on, didn't change. We're just going to move on. So let me paint you a picture here. It's the 27th, 10 a.m. to be exact. I'm at the warehouse or on my way to the warehouse. I don't really remember. But, I send a message and I noticed that Yuri has left the chat last night. So I ask in the chat and I'm like, hey guys, just wondering, is everything okay with Yuri? Now, if today is the 27th, we're supposed to start filming with Yuri on Monday, by the way. So he's like on board. Yuri left the group chat. Liam, on a film shoot, was also unresponsive. So Steven's freaking out. And so am I. We have no artist. Liam is MIA. And Steven asked me to make a post for a new 3D sculpting artist. I don't know if this is important, but I totally forgot about the amount of backlash I got on this post. I don't usually post to hire people in these groups. So yeah, tons of backlash. To be clear, we were offering a paid gig and these people were coming into the post to give me their opinion. They could just not apply. But maybe I'm in the wrong here, please. I'm sorry. But anyways, in the sea of all the backlash I got from this post, there was one guy, my ray of sunshine, if you will. Inevitably, he messaged me and was like, I'm interested in the position. Gave me a little more details. We hopped on a phone call right away. It was just him and I, though. And he's like, yeah, I'm down, whatever, all good. Promise the world. Maybe that's, the common theme with all these guys. So yeah, we think we're back on track. We got this Josh guy. We have a call scheduled, I think, after the weekend so that he could do more research. He said he wanted to reach out to a couple people. Totally understandable. So Monday morning, 32 minutes before the call. 32 minutes before the call. I'm at my desk, coffee in hand, ready to go. And this man says that he is not a good fit for the job and won't even join the call to say that. Just like, he sends another message. He's like, I was talking to my buddy Tyson, and he's kind of interested, and he puts his email in the chat. I was pretty salty at this point, so I didn't want to contact this Tyson guy. I had taken that screenshot and put it in the chat. So Liam actually is the one that reached out to Tyson directly. That's how we found Tyson, I guess. And Tyson is a reoccurring character, so we'll put Tyson up here. Tyson is the 3D sculpting artist guy. Tyson and I are good friends. Anyways, after Liam reached out, some back and forth. On the 1st, Ty was officially on board for the project and was coming to the warehouse later that week to look at the exoskeleton build process and kind of direct us to build it exactly what he's looking for. Okay, now that you know about everything that happened before Tyson, all the eras of the build proposal and everything basically that happened up until that point, I think we're just about ready to jump into video. Even though some things were an illusion, 100% of the reactions were real. So whenever, Steven would say, I haven't seen this since, or I haven't seen this in 2 weeks, or I didn't know about this, that was 100% authentic. Every reaction on camera was authentic. When they get pranked, whatever, nobody knew about any of that stuff. Nobody was acting. Another thing is, I'm not going to be reacting to the video per se. Think of it like a director's cut. I'm basically going to be going through the video on my own time. I will bring up relevant things on screen and I'll comment on it, maybe give you a little bit of insight. This is a Bugatti. There isn't much for me to say right here. I have a picture of the behind the scenes of the setup, which maybe I'll put right here. The whole shoot at the junkyard recycle facility was done in 1 day at Plazic. I got there earlier, planted the car. We had Jeff right on it, so it matches like the other cars. I took all the wheels off of it. We basically made it blend in more. I put a lot of dirt on it. A couple hours later, Liam and Steven show up and kind of start filming right away. I believe we started by getting the intro shot, and then we did the walk with Jeff to the car, and then we went to the back to kind of go through the scrap metal and stuff. All done within 1 day. We were in and out. You can see right here the air intake box I just pulled out and kind of left there for aesthetics. There's no reason for that to be out there. Molding? I don't know. You can see the wheels are back on the car, and they were behind it earlier. Steven used them for that reinventing the wheel gag thing. All the scrap metal that we got from the junkyard was transported beside the car on the bed of the truck. I rented out this entire warehouse. So many lines from this video live in my head rent-free. This is one of them. Let me take a little pause to talk about the warehouse, okay? All the power was on one side, all right? The lighting was terrible. There was only a little room in the back, and that was the bathroom. So there was no clean space. If we were sanding, the entire space had dust. That's just it. It was pretty dirty. Now, I remember during our tour, when we went to go see this place, I asked the guy, I was like, we're going to be using some power tools. What's the power situation? He's like, oh, there's plenty of power, 60, 100 amps. I don't know. They used to have machines there. He's like, I think there might even be 220. I was like, no, we don't need that. We just need one. He's like, no worries. There's power. Now, you probably know where this is headed. There was not enough power. Okay, there was 2 15-amp circuits, and one of them was shared with the lights. So that basically meant that we could have 2 tools, 2 plug-in tools going at any time. So if someone was cutting, we could only have 1 grinder going. Even if we had more people, which we did a lot of the time, we had to get creative. And when the welder came out, that was an even bigger issue. And the worst part is that the fuse box was in their space. We couldn't just flip our own breaker. We had to contact them. Oftentimes they weren't even in the buildings. We had to wait for somebody to come with a key. The power situation was less than ideal, even though we asked them. There was also a whole bunch of junk in the back of the space. All of that, he assured me, was going to be gone before we move in. And guess what? It was all still there. And one more thing. Garbage. We're gonna have a whole bunch of garbage. So I was like, what about the garbage? Can we throw in this dump? He's like, oh, you do whatever. Unlimited. They come take it whenever, blah, blah, blah. We got in trouble. He wanted us to pay. So basically everything he said during that walk was just straight up a lie. It was off to a great start. Okay, I swear, I'm done bitching about the warehouse. Let's get back to the video. Before we can build, first, we must destroy. Another line that lives in my head rent-free. I know what you're thinking. Why destroy? Why this? I've read the comments, okay? I know. But this comment perfectly summarizes and describes the situation. Yeah, it's more entertaining to destroy than it is to unbolt. And guess what? A lot of these things that were destroyed, I still had to go in and unbolt after. So why does Mr. Beast shred a Lamborghini? It's the same concept. Also, that lady that says beautiful Genuine, we were just filming and she said that, so. Before we did destroy though, there was a big talk about what we can't destroy and the no-go zones. And yeah, we get to the teardown. So the teardown actually did take 60 hours. I did the majority of the teardown by myself. Okay, this clip gets me every single time. This was not scripted, planned, or anything. This is not a gag. He literally just walked up and did that, and I was standing behind the camera, and I remember my heart sank. I thought thousands of dollars of damage to the car, and like, I was just thinking worst case scenario. But yeah, I literally just pushed it back from the other side and it went back up. Pro tip, don't have your jacks too close to the center, because then the car tips. Now one thing you'll notice is me in this clip taking apart the gas tank like fill hole thing, and the plan was that we were going to extend it and put it kind of where the Bugatti would have it. Now we did extend it, we bought all the tubes and everything, so it is extended in the back. However, we didn't end up incorporating that port on the outside. So if you did want to fill the Bugatti with gas, you would have to, I guess, crawl under, get inside, and then use that old fill hole that's extended and kind of just laying there in the back. Oh, on a side note, I'm pretty sure that the car only had $50 of gas, filled it up with $50 when I drove it down to the warehouse the first time, and that's been the only gas that I'm willing to bet was in this car until it got destroyed. I don't think anybody would have crawled in the back to fill up the gas, or anybody even knew that it was back there, but yeah, there you go. Anyways, moving on. We don't know if this thing is gonna explode right now. Yeah, I have a confession to make. This is another break the illusion moment. Like I said earlier, I did drive it down, so we knew it did run. We also did know about the leak. If you can see before we started, there's that cat litter sand stuff. It's on the ground. I'm not sure how nobody caught this in the comments, but yeah, we clearly knew about the leak before the leak happened in the video. We also 100% knew it was gonna start. Now, I will say that I had no idea that it was supposed to be a gag, so I was in the dark completely. Maybe Liam was in on it, I'm not sure. But yeah, I was in the dark. I basically sat in the passenger side and going with the flow. I had no idea what was happening. Maybe it's because I know theatrics or fake or whatever, but the, oh no, what is that? Gets me every time. We also ended up replacing the smooth idler pulley because that was making a lot of noise. We did all the brakes, so we had to do the brake fluid and bleed that as well. We did the engine oil and the oil filter. Yeah, that's it. Where was I? Bone. Now, the next part of the video is all about the bones. And yes, 99% of the metal that we used for this stage was actually the scrap metal that we got from Plastic. The only exception is the two long pieces that went along the roof line. Those were two new steel pieces, and that's because we needed to make them like an intricate angle to match the curvature. So yeah, the only new metal that we bought was 3 long pieces, and one of them was a spare. We ended up using 2. Yeah, so everything else was the scrap metal. That scrap metal has like a nice thick layer of rust. It was just like sitting out in the open on the field. Now, if you've ever welded in your life, that's great. You know that welding rust doesn't work. If you've never welded in your life, here's how I would explain the current situation, right? Welding to rust is like trying to attach 2 pieces of paper with chewing gum, except instead of it being paper, it's 2 pieces of heavy steel. So it doesn't work. Yeah, that meant that every single piece had to be grinded down and sanded until we could see bare metal before we could weld to it or attach to it. And then for all these shelf brackets, they were basically like 2 half rectangles that were attached together. They slot together. So if you cut the ends, they got loose. We had to go around and expose the metal so that we can kind of tack weld the entire 2 halves together, which we used for the bumpers, front and rear. The 2 long blue pieces were used for the side skirts. The rest were kind of just used to make the rest of the exoskeleton. So yeah, we did use every single piece you see on this screenshot, except for the little pieces I'd initially planned to use for, I don't know, fabrication, or maybe if we needed to make brackets or things like that, but we ended up doing very little of that. So all the little pieces we really didn't end up using. Oh, by the way, remember earlier when I said we had 2 circuits? This was the electrical setup. There was 2 really long extension cords from each circuit. Blue was the one, and orange was the cotton sock, which was blue, whatever. Nobody cares. The next part of the video is the side quest 3D scan thing. And the reasoning given in the video is that we did this for the drawing. Now again, I'm gonna break the illusion just a little bit here and let you in on a little secret. The 3D scan happened later, like while we were in the warehouse, and we already had the drawings at that point. Liam, I guess, I'm not really sure exactly how he did it, but Liam had found maybe a model or something, and gave us like an isometric view, top, sides, whatever, with all the dimensions that we needed. And we had that pretty early on in the process. And that was supposed to resemble like the ideal Bugatti. It wasn't, you know, the G6 Bugatti with the altered dimensions. We had those drawings from the very beginning. So this whole 3D scan thing, while they may have delivered files to Liam or Steven later, we didn't actually use it for anything. There were talks at some point about using that 3D scanned model to kind of projection mapping, like real life projection mapping with projectors. Definitely didn't have time to dabble with anything like that. Another couple iconic lines that live rent free in my head. This is a 3D scanner. We're gonna take this and scan it.
Oh, that's crazy.
Damn. That's crazy. All right, now we show off the finished exoskeleton. You can see that the only two new pieces are the roof lines that we talked about. The roof is still exposed at this point, and that's because we didn't want to limit access in the car. Back there as well is where the spare tire was, but we actually cut and then left a gap under the car. That gap we always refer to as the manhole. One thing that's not mentioned in detail is exactly how we lowered the car. We did that with two ways. We cut the springs, like fully cut them, so this thing was sitting on hopes and prayers. And then we added those blue bars as like side skirts, so it extended. It made it look like the body was a lot lower than what it is. Okay, so another thing that's not really talked about is the wheel situation. Now, I say something along the lines of we extended the body by about 5 inches, and if you really think about it, that would mean that the wheels would be 5 inches recessed. Now, you can't really buy 5-inch spacers. Believe me, I tried. I've looked. Biggest spacers you can really find are 2-inch spacers, and those are not really that common. The most common, biggest size is 1 inch. So it's 1 inch on either side, which some would label as 2 inch. We're just going to call them 1 inch. We're going to count one side and assume that the same is happening on the other side. We had 6 1-inch spacers. So we were sitting at 6 inches of total space. And you can kind of see it here in this screenshot. Now, I don't know what the legality of spacers are, but I'm pretty sure this wasn't safe. We had some concerns, but we did some tests and it was fine. Hopes and prayers, I tell you. And then we get into the famous driving scene. Finished the exoskeleton, painted it in the afternoon, and then we took like a break for food, came back, and then once the sun had set, we did the driving out in the field scene, which happened right outside of the warehouse. Also, I can't believe nobody made a joke about the bucket seats. I'm disappointed, chat. Oh, you can hear that V6 Powell when it starts. Straight pipe, like I said. I don't think there's a sound effect. I think this is the legit start sound of the G6. Oh, you know what time it is. It's time for another line that lives rent-free in my head.
Why am I doing pull-ups?
I'm building my body. Okay, I'm done. So, just the drawings earlier. We had them long ago. Okay, so this is the first time we see Tyson on screen. Now, let's zoom back out, look at our timeline again for a second. Tyson had signed on the 1st. He said he was coming later that week to the warehouse to kind of see the progress and give us a little guidance on the exoskeleton. He was working with Liam in terms of like ordering materials and had until Tuesday to finish the exoskeleton, because Tyson, I think, was starting on Wednesday. That was going to be his first day at the warehouse, and we had to be done with the majority of the exoskeleton work. I did have to add like minor bits and pieces here and there for us to attach the mesh onto, and obviously the roof that's still open, I did have to weld a few pieces to make the base for our mesh. But other than that, the majority of the exoskeleton work was done before Tyson started on Wednesday. So this interview with Tyson, I believe, was shot on his first day. I'm not exactly sure how long the mesh process took, maybe a day or two, not more than 3 though. Doors were shut closed because of that PVC pipe curvature thing that we were doing, and we had mesh going there, so all that was kind of protruding where the door would open for the time being until it was completed. Okay, side note here, you can see me lifting the car up and bringing it down, and I can't tell you, like, you can watch all these time lapses and see how many times the car goes up, down, up, down, up, down. It's every time it's for a different reason. We ended up going up and down a billion times. And then on a whole other side note, early on we spent half day making all these tape lines on the ground. I was like, why are we doing that? These lines don't relate to anything. As soon as we move the car or anything happens, Tyson's like, I got this, I got it. And then a day later, take it up, bring it back down, and you can clearly see that it just shifted. Without a lift, there's not much really you can do. It is going to shift. So a whole day doing all these lines, a day later, it was useless. We never used them. Another nobody cares point. So this is the day the prank setup happens. It's Friday, and Saturday is prank day. And everyone was in on the prank except for Tyson and Brandon. However, here's the thing, okay? Tyson lived about 40 minutes, an hour away, something like that. And I lived about 15 minutes away. So sometimes he would come crash at my place. This Friday was one of those times, and we ended up going out for a few drinks. We may or may not have been out much later than we should have been. So the next morning we were all late and we were supposed to be there 8:30. I think didn't get out of here until 9. Some more context. Side note, you can see the hole in the hood is still there, and that's because we need access to the battery. At this point, we hadn't really run any wires or anything like that, so we left a little hole. Once we were done the foam stage, I ran like a main lead to under the steering wheel. And then from there, I ran smaller gauge wire to every corner of the car. Okay, this clay segment, I was never a big fan of, and I thought was also a big waste of time, but it was done for entertainment purposes. We were supposed to get a lot of the clay in there, which we were going to end up using for the interior anyways, so it was like part help, part fun. A lot of the clay we ended up throwing in there, we never used. It did, however, bring us one more line that lives rent-free in my head. Circumcision. And also, I did win $100, and I bought a round of drinks that night for everybody. Like I said, we went out earlier, so yeah. This leads me to the prank. We're getting to the juicy parts here. Okay, first, let me say this. This line...
Ever had any rants with cops?
Yeah, just assuming that I'm trouble, just of how I carry myself.
Was a setup. And I don't mean like a setup like in that way. Let me elaborate. Tyson said something to Liam that was along the same lines. There was no camera rolling. But then I guess Liam reported that to Steven and they were like, oh, I wish we were rolling. So then Liam tried to get him to say something again while he was rolling, like about the cops, right? Here's the thing. We always had music playing in the background while we were working. Whenever we were rolling video, we would stop the music. So it was very clear whenever we were rolling. Steven had asked Liam to get his reaction while also killing the music, which I always thought was going to raise suspicion. Point is, the music off. If you heard what it sounded like, I will play it again.
Ever had any rants with cops?
Yeah, just assuming that I'm trouble, just of how I carry myself.
It does not sound good, and that's because there is music in the background. Now, Steven was pissed when he got the clip from Liam and he heard the music in it and was like, oh, we can't use this, blah, blah. I ended up like saving it with some EQ or like an AI tool. I honestly don't remember. I did 30 minutes of YouTube and figured it out. Point is, that was the best result I could get, and that's what we ended up with. So that's why it sounds like shit. Now, I don't want to be I told you so, but I did tell you so. All right? When I was told about this prank, I brought up 2 main concerns, all right? One, why don't we hire an actor? We're just looking for a guy to take his shirt off. We don't need a stripper per se. And they're like, no, it has to be stripper, it has to be stripper. I was like, okay, sure. I was like, but then we're gonna get a stripper that's gonna show up with like Spirit Halloween cop costume. And they're like, no. We're gonna make that a requirement. I was like, okay, what if we're in film again, right? So what if we try to find a costume person or a good cop costume that we can rent, we can provide to this person? No. Don't worry. Between the 3 of us, we had a solid script for this person to go off of. It had nothing to do with fumes, by the way. There was no fumes in it. Like, not at all did we mention fumes, okay? I show up the morning of, half an hour late, make up some bullshit excuse on the way there so that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna make a coffee run, Tyson. You go first and then we'll catch right up. I'm on this coffee run, but I'm just in the opposite parking lot with Steven, and I see this guy napping in his Tesla in his police shirt with his skinny jeans and his fucking black Converse or Vans or whatever. Not cop attire, okay? This guy got paid about $500 and he wanted more because they were half an hour late, even though he was paid for an hour and he left before the hour was up. Whatever, right? He was trying to finesse for more money. Guy made a cool $500, failed his lines, showed up with nothing. Here's the juiciest part about the prank, in my opinion. And some people noticed this in the comments. Steven shows the screenshot of the conversation, Tyson saying he's going to be late. He puts Tyson's real phone number on there. Yeah, that kind of sucks for Tyson, to be honest. Tyson was not happy about it. Whatever. I don't want to get too much into it. The point is, when Tyson asked for it to be taken down, Steven was like, I can't really use the YouTube editor while it was going viral, whatever. I get it, right? It's fine. You don't want to fuck with it while it's going viral. But there was a re-upload of the entire series, like not too long ago, and it still had Tyson's phone number in there. So, I don't know, man. I feel like that should have been removed, but that's just my 2 cents. Whatever. Oh, also, please do not harass Tyson. Thank you. Oh, another piece of trivia is the bucket Liam is sitting on is the same bucket from the scene from earlier. And the screw on it is because I tried to screw it into the body of the car, but then we ended up just using ratchet straps because obviously the screws didn't work. What do you expect? Also, one thing I want to shout out is the couch we made from the old G6 seats. We had it on a skid and that rolling thing. 10 out of 10. I'm going into full hater mode for a second here and just bear with me. I remember the night before on Friday, everybody left. Liam, Steven, and I stuck behind and we were talking about the prank and where we're going to shoot from, where Liam's going to hide. We built that little eagle's nest that he was in. And there was tension, okay? There was tension in this room about where Liam needs to film from and what he sees fit. And to be honest, Liam was being a bit of a diva about it. But besides the point, there was clear tension. Liam wasn't happy. Steven was making like little edits as we were going, so sometimes we got to see scenes. So I got to see the prank scene pretty early on. And I see the footage, and it's this overexposed ass bullshit. This whole ass thing. And oh, it has to be. Come on. Okay. It's over. I'm out of hater mode. I swear. We're done. Back to body. More up, down, up, down, up, down. You see how it goes. One thing I want to touch on is how Tyson sculpted the foam to get the shape. He basically went around with these knives. I believe some of them were even just kitchen knives. A couple of them were a saw or something. But for lack of a better word, he was just using large knives that he would go around and slice. Think like someone using a chainsaw to make like slices to sculpt something. So that was kind of the approach he was taking. And once he had something close enough, he would then go in with these abrasive grinder discs that we found at the hardware store. Is he would use these discs to kind of like round out the corners. The less skilled of us would then go after and then sand it down. Now at this point with the foam, I think the exterior looked the best. Kind of really had like an aesthetic with the swirly foams and whatever. Looking back at it, this was probably the best the Bugatti has ever been in that exact point. And one thing that's not really touched on in the video at all is how we made the interior structure. So you can see here we used some wood, just like 1/2-inch plywood. And these, I think they were 2x2s, maybe 2x1s, whatever. The wood was self-tapping screws. We screwed into the body of the car, and then we used normal wood screws to do the plywood on there. You can see we had the speakers at this point. So we had the templates cut out for that back piece. And then we made this like big shelf where the engine would be. And that's where all the like decorative engine parts would go on top. There was a gap for plexiglass that was going to go there, and then a big wooden interior piece. I'll put an example here. That's what it looks like in the Bugattis. Everything had like a wood base to it. Another thing you can see here is that we kept the original door handle. At this point, we had finished the curvature, so the door was free for a little bit from the curvature. However, then it was still like 5 inches recessed in, so it had to be bulked out. We added like a small layer of mesh, and it was foamed as well, but then rather than try to figure out how to make the handle extended out, we kind of feathered everything down into the handle. So there was like almost like a hole in the foam, and we kept the handle as the original piece. At this point, the door was foamed shut. You know, we wanted to have like a clean door seam. So we had foamed it to the side, and then we were going to cut it free after. While we're on the topic of doors, let's just take like a little deep dive in there. There's this big gap, and we went through multiple iterations of trying to foam this and Bondo it and whatever to try to cut it free, measuring different angles. At some point, we thought about using like fabric to cover it, trying to cut it at all the different angles. Must have been done 5 or 6 times. Yeah, one of the ideas that I came up with was the floor strip, which I did end up using because I couldn't think of anything else. Point is, after we couldn't figure out the angle, we went into the route of trying to make it like a black void. Another thing that's door related was the glass. Part of the reason why we went with the G6 was because we wanted a door that was frameless on top. We'd also talked about potentially cutting the glass to match the new curvature. Ultimately, we just ended up kind of leaving it in the door. Now that we're done with the doors, one last note on the body was there this fin thing on the back stuck on there by finishing nails. Okay, now let's take a little break from the video to discuss what's happening in our timeline. What we just watched with the foam stage obviously happens much later in the timeline, so I'm going to fill you in on what happened between, you know, that point and then the foam stage. So we had an all hands on deck meeting, I think the day of the prank, maybe a day after, but basically what was happening is we had blown through the foam budget, the schedule, and we were trying to regroup and figure out how we're going to hit the finish line. So I remember we were making this schedule from sticky notes. I'll have a picture here. The schedule that we had was kind of made by Liam, and he was like prying this information out of Yuri and setting some of these timelines onto him. To my knowledge, neither Yuri, Josh, or Tyson had ever created like a concrete timeline or build plan or proposal or anything like that to be added here. So yeah, this is the most concrete thing we have, is that sticky note timeline we all created together. Now, I can't find a direct screenshot of this, but I remember early on the number of 16 cans of spray foam was thrown around. So we ended up buying a whole case, which has 24, and we thought that was going to be enough to do the whole car. At this point, we had used, I don't know, maybe like 60 cans, and we ended up using about 120 cans total, okay? So yeah, maybe 100 more than the initial estimate. On one side, you had Liam and Steven pushing Tyson to wrap up the foam because we're using up so much foam and we're blowing through the budget, which is valid. But at the same time, Tyson wants to kind of get the foam bulked out better, get it to a better shape. In hindsight, I kind of side with Tyson a little bit since the Bondo was harder to deal with. I think we should have taken more time to make the foam better, but again, this is all hindsight 2020. At the time, I think I was on the side of Steven and Liam of like, let's move on. So during this time, every day we show up, every day we're working, every day we're foaming, and this is escalating day by day. At some point, we try to suggest the bigger cans of foam, but it doesn't spray the same. We had to return it. Every day, Liam would be like, okay, today's the last day. So that kept escalating until ultimately Tyson just kind of gave up. Now, unfortunately, I do not have an exact date on when we started the Bondo, but according to the schedule and kind of what I remember around the time and the pieces that I'm able to put together, it was around the 17th. We were supposed to be starting the Bondo on the 15th. Obviously, all these delays were eating up into all the time that we had to do all the Pimp My Ride, all the paint, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, though, we do start the Bondo the next day. And that night, I believe we all stayed late. We got pizza and some drinks. And the morale was up. Tyson was showing us how to apply the Bondo and everybody was excited. Woohoo! We finished stage 3. We're moving on to the next stage. Now, I want you to keep in mind that the vibes at this point were at the highest they were ever going to be. All-time high, okay? Everything goes downhill from here in terms of vibes. Anyways, next day we start with the Bondo work, and that brings us back to where the video is. So we start Bondo stage. Now again, similar to the time and budget estimates we got from the last round on the foam, Tyson said it would be 3 or 4 days and it would be about 6 tubs of this Bondo thing. But since we've learned from last time that Tyson's estimates are slightly off, we had kind of estimated that this would take about 5, maybe 6 days, and we would use about 13 tubs. That's double what Tyson had estimated, by the way. Now the days start to go by and we get deeper and deeper in this hole. More Bondo and more Bondo. More Bondo. What was supposed to be a few days had ballooned into a week, and we're now going on to week 2 of Bondo. And to be honest, none of us, including Tyson, had the skills to lay the finishing Bondo that we needed to get a smooth surface. The door hinge gap was causing a lot of stress and was still a major issue. We're halfway through the week, about 30 tubs of Bondo deep. I kid you not, we are causing Bondo shortage in the greater Toronto area. Every morning, every afternoon, every lunch, we try to hit as many Canadian Tire. We're buying all their tubs. I'm calling around. They're telling me it's out of stock. They're having a shortage issue. Like, their sales must have spiked and they just started ramping up Bondo production and nobody was buying it after. Anyways, at the end of that week, Liam had a trip planned, so he was always off on the schedule and was basically going to be unavailable. Before his trip, I believe that's when Liam stepped down as a producer. And that's when the producer duties were handed off to me. The transition here left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Whatever. I don't want to get into too much details. Yeah, ended the week with me transitioning into the producer, but we didn't tell the rest of the team until Liam came back next week. During this week, the vibes were getting lower and lower every day. We're blowing past timelines, we're blowing past budget. Liam was clearly visibly stressed, and everybody could see it there. And that wasn't really helping Tyson or I perform. The whole vibes were just off. And I think, stepping down from the producer role kind of helped him with his stress a little bit. But I think the vibes in the whole place kept going on a straight downwards trend. There was like this whole narrative brewing of like, why isn't Steven here? Why isn't Steven helping? And I personally was never under the impression that Steven would be at the warehouse, helping us lay Bondo every day. So I'm not sure why. Point is that they were kind of almost mad at Steven for putting us through this, which whatever. I don't understand that point of view, but that was their point of view. Been in professional settings where, it's all about shit talking the higher ups or the boss or whatever. And I don't like that. I wasn't standing up to them. I wasn't like, don't you dare talk about Steven, but I wasn't maybe participating or progressing the conversation. I was more like cup half full guy, right? I was trying to provide that perspective. And I believe at that point, they also kind of maybe had the feeling that I was more on Steven's side, since I was now like the producer or whatever. I was trying to remain neutral, at least towards them, even if I didn't, see their side. And I was more on Steven's side because, we were hired to do the job. I don't know why we would be mad at Steven. So yeah, even Brandon, okay, who's a full-time job. So he was just coming to help on the weekends when he had time. And then it'd come the weekend after the transition. Like I remember we were outside and he's like, why are the vibes so down? Like what happened? What changed? We also hired an extra set of hands to help with the interior. I don't think he's ever shown in a video. We hire another set of hands that weekend when Liam is gone, which is actually Ante. So that's not shown in the video, but Ante is Tyson's friend and more on that later. But he does come to help us on the weekend for one day. He works 6 days a week, so he came one day to help us. And it was clear that he had the skill set we lacked. Gave us the first smooth surface we had seen on the car up until that point. So yeah, it's now the weekend, the 24th of June, and we have 1 week left at the warehouse. We're still knee deep in Bondo with no end in sight. So I basically kind of let everyone know, if we're not priming the car Monday morning, there's no way we can finish. And even priming Monday morning, gonna be like 16-hour days. So we have to be done Bondo this weekend. I was still not certain, and I was like, this is not gonna take the primer, but Tyson assured me at the time, and you know, there's a little debate on whether or not he did or didn't, but to my recollection, Tyson assured me that the primer filler that we were going to use was going to fill all of these tiny little holes. And he said that was all going to be fixed by the primer filler. Now, trusted. I had no reason to not trust him, but I kind of knew it wasn't going to work. So I let Steven know, you come in Monday, if that surface that you see is not what you're expecting, then we can't have a finished Bugatti. And that's when this scene was done. We basically primed for a few hours the night before. We sanded and then primed again in the morning before Steven showed up. And it was obviously not good. Not to mention the interior was, you know. Also, during this time, I had kind of started looking into maybe we can extend our time at the location. So I started contacting the landlord. Then I got in contact with the people that are moving in afterwards. And unfortunately, they were planning to move during that weekend. They were actually hoping that we would move out like Thursday so they can start Friday. So yeah, we couldn't stay longer. Couldn't finish in time. We're still good friends, Tyson. So I'm not trying to like shit talk. But, you know, I remember that last kind of week, you didn't touch the Bondo at all. It was very difficult to get you to do checklist items we needed to complete before we had to get out of the warehouse. So yeah, whatever. So yeah, the plan for this week shifted from trying to finish to trying to get everything we needed from Tyson done before the end of the week. The interior, the rear brake light, fins, the exhaust tip as well. Now let's take a little side on the interior. The plan for the interior was always going to be the clay, right? That's why we did the clay throwing thing in there. Tyson, at some point in the middle, had done like a little clay base, and we showed up the next morning and it was all cracked. Now I'm not sure why we didn't look into how we can get clay to stay without cracking. He said something about the angles being too aggressive. I'm not sure. Besides the point. The solution Tyson provided was that it all had to be done back to back. So we would go clay into fiberglass, like boom, boom, same day. So I was like, sure. It was Liam, it was Tyson, and we had an extra set of hands, and all three of them were just working on the inside. We would have had more if we could, but then it would have been like too crowded. One person mixing and two in there applying type thing all in one day. Now, till this day, I don't really know why we fiberglassed. Personally, very scared of fiberglass. Initially, Tyson wanted to fiberglass the exterior as well. So the plan was to do foam, Bondo, then fiberglass. But I know that fiberglass is hard, all right? Maybe some other people are better at fiberglass. Maybe what we did was user error. Maybe we weren't supposed to put clumps of fiberglass there. I'm not sure. Point is, it was a disaster. But yeah, you can see we attached some of the old plastics to the car to use as a base layer for the clay. But then the center, I had to cut all where the radio is because we ended up doing that wood thing that goes all the way up and down, and then it was covered with clay. And that's when I discovered something I totally forgot about. So at that point, we were connecting everything back, and I discovered that there was a connector that I had cut off when I was cutting the interior. Now that connector is the ECM module or something. It's very important. It was like 100 wires all in a bundle, and it connected to what I think is the computer of the car. That was a pretty big deal that we lost that. You can't really buy that. That's part of like the main wiring harness. So I knew we were fine. I then contacted the Plaza guys, seeing if they had a G6 that we could take that off of, which, by the way, we're not allowed. You can't cut something like that. You'd have to take the entire wiring harness. So I was like, it's a long shot within the long shot. I was like, I guess I'll come take the wiring harness off. They helped us out, and they like hooked it up big time. Amazing guys, thank you. And they let me basically get the connector. We cut it back, and then shouts out to Brandon, who spent an entire evening connecting and splicing every single wire on that connector. It was like 64 or something. So there's that. We were talking about the fiberglass earlier. So one of the reasons the fiberglass was pitched for the interior, okay, was because nobody wanted to deal with like fabrics. So the point is, we were going to get a sanded fiberglass surface inside that we can spray, and we were going to go with this tan spray. We would have to do like no cloth work or anything, and the seats were already figured out. So that was like a shortcut, but it ended up not shortcutting. Okay, so we get back to the video. This is the Monday of, we make the decision to not move forward, and that's when this clip happens. And for context, Steven had not seen the car for about 2 weeks. At this point, I had explained that the paint would go over it and we were still going to get like an uneven, bumpy surface. He called it off. And that's when Tyson also did his exit interview. And that leads me to another bit of drama. So the Tyson exit interview, we were recording everything genuinely. So when Tyson was wanting to talk to Steven about, leaving the project, Steven said we should do this on camera. And then they basically filmed something outside, walking towards the warehouse with the camera in front of them. And that first take was more truthful to what actually happened. However, after it was done, Tyson came back to Steven and was like, can we do a retake? And basically told him not to use the first one. So they did another. And later that day, when Liam handed the footage over to Steven, the first take was deleted. So a little more drama. Now, if you ask me, I don't know if Liam should have deleted the clip. If Steven had the clip and then ended up using it, I'm not sure how I would feel about that either. I think if you don't want to say something on camera, don't say it on camera. You can't just say it and then be like, oh, can I get a redo? I think that's where the issue really lies. Whatever. This whole scene here was shot during those 2 weeks when Steven wasn't coming. Now it's time for another line that lives rent-free in my head.
I don't know how to weld like Brandon, or no mechanics like Omar.
I'm gonna let you in on a little secret, okay? This scene right here used to have another prank. It may or may not be the next day. Where was I? Prank 2. What you're about to see right here is never before seen footage. Roll it!
I was just like this fake Bugatti. Nothing more than an imposter. Wait, that's it.
Since everyone was bummed out about not finishing the Bugatti, they would never see another prank coming. And suddenly I remembered that there was still one crewmate that I never pranked. I realized that Brandon was my last opportunity to pull off the ultimate prank and prove myself as a real YouTuber. The problem was, I didn't really know Brandon, so I didn't know what angle I could take. So I began to study all of the time-lapse footage frame by frame, and after many hours, I finally had it. It was right there all along. Brandon took this job knowing two things. One, that he would get to work on a car. Two, that he would get to work with his best friend, Omar. That means that the two things that Brandon cares about are his car and his best friend, Omar. But which one does he care about more? This was my angle. First, I had Liam bring a long ladder so that we could gain easy access to the roof of the warehouse. Then, once Brandon arrived, Omar would be setting up the ladder in plain sight.
Well, good thing you're here before I went up so I can show you what we need to do. Is this the tire with the pant cut?
Now that Brandon thinks Omar is on the roof, Liam leads him inside so that he can get started with putting tires back on the Bugatti.
How long is it going to take you to do each one of these tires? I'm supposed to be doing like BTS stuff.
But Omar never went up to the roof. I did. And that's where I would find a life-size dummy that was wearing Omar's exact clothes.
Dummy is in position. We're gonna pull this off.
Meanwhile, Omar would take a pair of scissors and cut his clothes to reveal a series of bruises that we painted on him earlier. Last but not least, Omar would attach fake windshield damage to Brandon's car before getting into position with a speaker. So, here's the plan. Liam is gonna direct Brandon's attention to a window in the warehouse. That's when I dangle the dummy from the roof so it looks like Omar is hanging from the roof. Then, Omar will cue me to drop the dummy from the roof, when at the same time, he'll play a glass smashing sound effect from his car speaker. Then, when Brandon rushes outside, he'll see his best friend Omar seriously injured, but he'll also see his car windshield damaged. And in that moment, we're gonna see Brandon's true colors. Will Brandon go to help his best friend, or will he go check his car? So here you can see me dangle fake Omar directly into the window of the warehouse. Now, Liam was waiting on Omar's signal so that he could point Brandon's attention to the dummy. But this is where something went horribly wrong. Omar realized that his iPad was dead, and that was what we were gonna use to play the glass shattering sound effect. So he starts panicking and he basically tells Liam to just wing it. And I mean, you can probably imagine how that's gonna go.
I'm gonna laugh. This way I'll be done putting the tires on.
Yeah. Dude, what is that? What the f is that dangling there?
That's fun. With Halloween?
We lose Omar?
Yeah, so that did not work at all. I can't pull off a prank for the life of me. Man, we put a lot of work into that too. You know what? Maybe being a real YouTuber is not about getting everything perfect. It's about this, it's being real. The prank didn't work and we're showing you that it didn't work. But you know what? Like, you guys clicked to see us build a Bugatti. So if nothing else, you're gonna get a fucking Bugatti. Let's go!
Okay, now that you've seen it, let me explain, okay? The plan was we were going to be on a conference call, which is what I was going to use my phone for, and then the iPad, I was going to play this sound. I'm kind of salty we never got to use it, but whatever. I had my car, all windows down, full blast, ready to play the sound, and then we're going to be on a conference call. Liam was going to give us the cue. Everything gets set in motion. First of all, I want to take full responsibility. I did have the dead iPad, so I set the initial plan off course. I don't know why Steven and Liam were still not on call. Whatever. So at the moment, here's the plan that we come up with, and I'm not sure, it might have been me. I honestly don't remember. But the plan we came up with was Liam was going to scream, like, "Oh my God, look, is that Omar?" I was going to hear him being like right outside the door, and then I was going to signal Steven, and then everything goes in motion. But when I watched the clip, Liam is speaking in the same volume he's talking to Brandon in. There's no way that I was going to hear him being 60 feet out, but whatever. To be honest, neither Liam or I were really excited for this plan. We didn't think it was going to work. This was Brandon's work truck, what you see in the video. So we'd planned to do it on his actual car, which he cares about. We wanted to make the car look damaged without actually damaging the car. So I was trying to find cracked glass type sticker. Anyways, it kind of all failed, and we didn't really set it up for the best chances. So yeah, there's that. To say that this prank was an epic fail is an understatement. Last week at the warehouse. So, if the vibes were bad before, the vibes were astronomically bad now. It was like Liam and Tyson were straight up giving me like prisoners in jail cell vibe. Even Brandon, who was only there on the weekends because he had a real full-time job during the week, had noticed. He's like, "Whoa, what happened to the vibes? Why are they so down?" So when I say the vibes are down, the vibes were down, 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 dude. Like I said, Tyson and I are still friends, so I hope this doesn't, destroy our friendship. But from my perspective, it was so hard to get Tyson to do any of the things we needed him to do on that last week. And we needed all these things done from Tyson because at this point, we were just looking for someone to come in and do like a top surface coat on the car Bondo, and we weren't going to open the can of worms per se. Like, we weren't going to reshape the car. We were kind of taking whatever shape we had, and we were just trying to finish it. So exhaust tip and the rear end and whatever, all that kind of stuff had to be completed by Tyson before somebody could come in and then do the top coat. At the same time, I was planning to move, finding out where we're going to store the Bugatti. I had started messaging other Bondo people. It was not a good time. And we had no place lined up. Like, we had nowhere to work, no warehouse, garage, whatever. So Steven and I agreed that it would probably be best to store the Bugatti and pick up in a few weeks when we have someone else lined up and we find a space. So found a storage unit that was down the street from the warehouse that we were at. And they had drive-in units. I went with Steven, and I remember during the sign-up, they were asking about all the car's paperwork, and I was like, it's not a car. It's a sculpture that looks like a car. But it's not a car. It's not like a registered vehicle. It was just Bondo on the outside. So the fact that I was calling it a sculpture was believable. And as long as we didn't, drive it in front of this guy, we should have been fine. So we got the keys, planned this top secret mission again in the middle of the night. I wish we had more footage of. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. We all hopped on like a conference call and we escorted the car. We kind of illegally drove it down the street to the storage facility to avoid like towing costs. In the moment, it felt straight out of like a Fast and Furious movie. But yeah, in hindsight, it probably wasn't. You can see it right there. It's not cool. All right, here's another line that lives rent-free in my head. These guys don't even know they got a Bugatti in their storage unit. This happened during the last week and added to the tension and drama that was happening. Liam was in charge of getting it set up. Anyways, he didn't get it set up properly or according to Steven's standards. Point is, it like added to the drama and the tension between the Liam Tyson side and the Steven side. Now we get into the 2 months later. So during these 2 months, I'd basically started looking from the last week of the warehouse, and it became, I want to say, almost part of my daily routine, and message people every single morning. Everything you could think of, I've tried, whether it's body, foam, Bondo. There were so many different variations of things that could have happened. Ideally, we just wanted to rent a space and have someone come work in there and we can film them just like how we've been doing. That was proving harder than we thought thought initially. Whenever somebody would come see it, they'd be like kind of down in the beginning, then they'd see it and then back out last minute. Maybe they throw crazy numbers like $40,000. So while I was looking, I always kind of knew that Ante had the skills, but when we met Ante during the project, he was working 6 days a week and he basically had like no interest in taking anything on, or at least that's what he said at the time. So I had reached out to Tyson to try to get in contact with Ante. And again, no hate, Tyson. Getting Ante's contact from you, I think, was very, or maybe a little difficult. I wouldn't say very, but was a little difficult. And I can understand it is a little bit of a weird spot. Anyways, I finally get Ante's contact. I try to work something out with him. He comes out to see it. He gives me a list of materials, an estimate. We're all good. 2 weekends, and he was done. Till this day, he gave us one of the most accurate time, cost, material estimates. Like it was amazing. He was in and out, no problems. What he promised is what he delivered. Great job, Ante. And then I found a new location. Now we're kind of caught up with the video again. New location. We take the car from the storage facility that we had, which was near the old warehouse, to the new warehouse, which is about 40-50 minutes away from the city. Another thing that's notable is from this point on, we no longer have a videographer. Everything that we film in terms of update is just shot on phones and GoPros, and we basically just hire a videographer for the last reveal day. The new place we got was in a bit of a rough condition. It was kind of dirty and it needed some love. However, at this, we had known that the Bondo work and all the painting and stuff was much dirtier, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I remember even telling the landlord, don't bother cleaning, we'll kind of clean on our way out because we're going to make a bigger mess. Anyways, we get to actually fixing the car at the new location, and everything at this point was just following Ante's lead. We went around the car. He basically was doing like a pressure test. He would kind of push down on the Bondo, and wherever it would crack or it was soft, we would make a big hole. We put 2-part 5-minute epoxy to give it some structural rigidity. After we filled the holes with epoxy, it was Bondo sand, Bondo sand, Bondo sand, you know the drill. And then at the end, we used this red paste stuff, which I didn't even know was a thing. Apparently it's to cover all the tiny holes. And after I primed, he came back and did any minor imperfections that were left or were visible at that point. One more thing is we were using different Bondo. We were using this 3M stuff. It had a better consistency, so it went on easier. Now, I'm not sure if it would have made that big of a difference, since I think a lot of it is like the skill of applying it is not so much the material itself. But I will note that we used better quality Bondo at that point. And at this point, the Bondo exterior was looking the absolute best. Just like I had mentioned the foam point where it looked the best, this was the best the Bondo exterior had looked. More struggles. Where do I even begin? So, those last 2 weeks were a lot of struggles. I was very stressed. I was dealing with a lot. One of the main things that I ran into was I had to lift the car to do some work on the rims. As soon as I lifted the car, I guess the pressure of the jacks and stuff cracked the Bondo in a couple of spots. And you can see in some of the time lapses, I'm fixing a spot in the front. There was like 3 big cracks in the front end where, you know, that was like arguably the best looking part of the car had now been destroyed. So I was panicking low key. Every day, trying, while I'm working on whatever it is that I'm working, I sand it, I try to even it out with Bondo, maybe I add more primer, I wait for it to dry, I come back. I'm trying my best to save that front end. And if you can't tell, my Bondo skills are lacking, so I was just kept making it worse. And that would make me panic even more. Now, in hindsight, I should have done everything with the wheels before this stage and had them covered and put them on. However, I guess we were all reckless at the previous location, so the wheels at this point had a lot of Bondo and foam and stuff on them, so I definitely had to take them off. The rims were a project on their own. Also, we still had hopes with the interior that I could kind of shave it down, maybe sand it a little bit, and then we can put the pleather stuff on the interior and kind of cover it all. And maybe I was doing something wrong. You can, obviously, it's user error, but I could not sand this fiberglass down. I was even having a hard time trying to like cut off the peaks or slice them. It was just not easy to deal with. It was all tight spots. I went around and kind of cut out as much as possible, and then we ended up using this fabric thing with like a bunch of foam on the back to ease all the bumpiness. So here's the thing. While we did have a smooth-ish, shiny-ish looking exterior that was way better than it was before, everything I'd hoped to accomplish with the interior was going downhill. I couldn't clean the gauges. It was like that epoxy blended in with the car. It was kind of careless during the application, so it was all over the gauges. It was all over the steering, everything. Everything had epoxy, clay, and fiberglass on it. And while everything was going downhill day by day, I was planning big shoot reveal day, and Steven wasn't coming to the warehouse press at this point to capture a genuine reaction so that he doesn't know what's going in the car. And I remember bringing this up with Steven because we couldn't talk about specifics. Like I couldn't be like, oh, I'm going to use this fabric instead because of that. But I was like, what if you show up to the reveal and it's a Walmart Bugatti? What do you do? And he said, I trust you to make the right call. And to be honest, that weighed a lot on me. This was still a $100,000 project. I was being trusted with all of this budget, and I was told to pull the final trigger if I think the car is good enough. Now, I know what you might be thinking. The car isn't good enough. Maybe it could have been better. There's a factor that you are forgetting, and that is we had been on this 5-month journey together. We kind of had the mentality of we were ready to move on. We were ready to film the finale and just move on. With all these factors in mind, I was questioning myself daily, but ultimately, I didn't call it off, and we went through with the final shoot date, which was a couple of weeks away at this point. Top of the Bugatti build, I had a job. I was the post-production supervisor on 2 of the biggest projects I had taken on at that point in my career. So every time I'm on camera, I'm sitting there on my phone, or I'm behind the camera on my laptop, fixing or helping or emailing or basically dealing with that world, isn't the Bugatti. I would basically wake up in the morning, do like a couple of hours of that, then head to the warehouse. And then once I'm done at the warehouse, I would come home, write a whole bunch of emails, go through stuff, schedule things for the morning, and rinse and repeat. So I was like double jobbed up, I was probably the most stressed I'd ever been in my entire life. And part of it was the sheer amount of hours, the decision of pulling a trigger on the Bugatti, getting everything coordinated. I didn't really know what to do, and Steven wasn't around. And that's when the updates, I started filming those solo updates throughout to kind of document my insanity. That night where I'm driving home, that's the night before the shoot. And to give you a little bit of context, I had 3 videographers drop out on me, 2 that same day. And then I found somebody at like 9 p.m. and I was driving home at like 10, and the shoot was like 9 a.m. the next morning. So less than 12 hours from the shoot, I basically didn't have a videographer, and I found somebody last minute. Shouts out Mateen. Thank you for coming clutch. The only thing that's going through my head at this point is Steven's going to see the car and be like, oh no. The next cut of the video takes us to the morning where we do the big reveal. Let me give you a little backstory about this location. I was trying to find somewhere to film the reveal from the very beginning. I talked to some showrooms, some car dealerships, you name it. Anywhere where you can display a car, I tried talking to them. Now this place we were at, Ultimate Exotics / Auto View, shouts out Sammy. This guy hooked us up. He was the landlord of the second location. And when we moved in, he saw the car on the tow truck. He was giving me the keys, and he's like, is that a Chiron? My buddy's got one of those. For context, there's only 5 of them in Canada. So when he said that, I was a little shocked. Oh, because one of the things I did look into was trying to find a real Chiron that we can have on set for that reveal day. That was one of the ideas. But when we found out that there's only 5 in Canada, we knew that it was like nearly impossible to get one. But yeah, from the day when we moved in, Sammy was down to help. He said that we can come shoot at his facility. He has supercars. And that kind of just like worked out. It was like the stars aligned. All right. I get there, obviously, a couple hours early with the tow truck. We use the same tow truck driver. We get it all set up in there. We're ready to roll, waiting for Steven to show up. Every time I see this clip, I can tell that my heart is pounding, but maybe it's just me. Okay, when people say like, oh, I swear time froze when this was happening. Yeah, that was kind of like an understatement, okay? That countdown of me going 5, 4, felt like straight up a half hour. I was like looking into Steven's eye, staring down his soul, and then we just get into the big reveal, which I know is a little underwhelming, but that's all we could do, man. The ZMDE on the license plate and the Z on the wheels is because Steven Song is also a Minecraft YouTuber, and his main channel is ZMDE. Initially, the first 2 videos before the Bugatti were actually posted on that channel, and then he decided to move everything to a new channel and continue doing Minecraft in the background. And that's when the Steven Song girls were born. That's you, Steven Song girl. Now, one of the issues I ran into with the flamethrower, the sparks. How do I spark that flamethrower? Thingies that were on it were too weak. It didn't work. And I guess in hindsight, the wires that we're using were too thin in terms of like the insulation. So anytime it would come near anything, it would arc outside of the insulation. You can see the gauges and everything inside is covered in epoxy, but I did my best to try and clean it up. The back exhaust thing was made from foam. So when we started spraying it with the chrome paint, it started to eat into it and melt. That's why it kind of looks weird like that. That's one of the things that happened on the last week. Like I start spraying the fins in the exhaust and they melt. So now what? I don't know. Again, shouts out to Sammy, AutoView, and Ultimate Exotics for helping us out with all these shots. Who would have thought we would have like supercars next to our junkyard Bugatti, right? Okay, a couple other things here. The back engine area thing, it was supposed to be its own project. We were going to fabricate some things from foam that looks like an engine bay. We were going to 3D print some pieces to go on there. None of this ended up happening. The fin was fiberglass and it was nearly impossible to sand or deal with because it was holding on by finishing nails. So if you actually like touched it, it was wiggling. So I basically got cloth and kind of just laid it down, stapled it, whatever. It was like black cloth everywhere. And then I put the two 3D printed pieces on top, which yeah, didn't really do anything. Now I am a little sad we didn't get to see more on the reveal. Like I wish we had just kind of like close-ups or just picture something that lets you kind of inspect it more, but I get that he was trying to do like a less is more. The drone crash is real, by the way, and we were getting the last bit of shots as the sun was setting, so when I went to actually go look for it, it was getting real dark, so I couldn't find it at the time, and I had to come back the next morning and get it. I ended up finding it the next day and retrieved the footage, and it was just fine. And the drone was perfectly fine. We used that drone in all the other videos afterwards. So yeah, we were done filming for the day. We took the Bugatti to be stored at Steven's mom's garage. And the plan was we were going to use it next spring in more videos. We were going to do like a couple pranks, maybe the thief thing, and then destroy it at the end. Okay. All right. I think it's serious time now. You've probably seen the other 3 videos that have come out since about trying to get the car stolen twice and then ultimately destroying the car in the end. And, you know, maybe you haven't seen it because they do have less views than the main one. Anyways, if you have seen it, then you know what I'm talking about. And I want to make sure that I say this again for the last time. I'm not trying to shit on Steven in any way, shape, or form. I thought Steven and I didn't end on bad terms. Even after he left, I reached out to him and I was trying to, whatever, right? I thought we were on good terms. What I don't understand is, just like how the Bugatti is or was a big part of your life and how the channel went viral, maybe there's more of a monetary value because he spent the money into it. I'm not trying to take away from how special it is to him. I'm just trying to say that it is also special to me. So when I tuned into the Bugatti destroyed video, I'm not going to lie, full disclosure, I got hit right in the feels. It was watching months and months of my life just go by like that and the car get destroyed. And the worst part is that this happened nearby. I could have been there if I would have known, if I had gotten an ad on my phone, if I'd gotten a message from Steven, if I had found out in any way, I would have been there. I'm not saying I would have been there to help on the video. I can get the hint, you know, if Steven doesn't want to work with me, bro, I understand. I get it. But just, you know, letting me know that it's happening at this event. And if I want to buy tickets to come see it, I could. I would have. I guess I did expect Steven to let me know that the Bugatti was getting destroyed. And I do feel some type of way about that. And I wish I would have witnessed the Bugatti send-off in person. No matter what the situation is between Steven and I guess I just always thought that maybe I'd be there for the Bugatti destruction. So yeah, I'm very sad I didn't get to experience this in person. And watching that moment where the Bugatti got destroyed and I did get emotional, you know, as cheesy as it sounds, it made me realize the Bugatti videos that came out are good and I'm proud of them. You know, the Bugatti video that I'm making right now is the Bugatti video that I want to watch. And that's, I guess, always been a thing that I did, but I've never really realized it. Whether I was a kid creating little music video snippets with, you know, my cousins and my sister in the living room and putting on performances for the family, or this old video, I just found it, or this other video, and this YouTube channel, and my other cringe eras that I had to go through to be here. I realized that I make content for me, and that's something that I didn't fully understand or grasp up until this point. And maybe it takes a Bugatti for me to understand this, but I get it now. I keep forgetting that I love to create, so this is for me. Whether it's this video, this channel, whatever it is I end up doing, I'm going to create wherever, whenever, and whatever I want to make. And that's the sauce. They tell you to not make videos for the views or for the clout or whatever. And they're right. Just, that's the sauce. You gotta do it for you. Okay. All right. No more serious. Okay. Enough with the soppy bullshit. We're moving on. It's time for comments and math. If you've been watching this video all along, then maybe you've been waiting for the section where I respond to the comments and do some of the math. So let's get started. First of all, one of the biggest things that were mentioned in the comments, I guess not just in the comments, but every time I told or somebody had seen the video, they're like, wow, this thing must have been really heavy with all that Bondo. And yeah, initially, I thought about it like that. I was like, all that stuff is got to be dense and heavy, right? So the car would be heavier than it was before. However, one night I put more thought into it, and I think that the internet is wrong. I think the car is actually significantly lighter than when we started with it. And hear me out. Let's do some quick math here, okay? For the sake of making this math easier, I'm just gonna assume that we have a full frame, engine, suspension, everything. We're just starting with a frame and the bones of the car. Now, according to the internet, a little chat GPT, some Reddit comments, the average weight frame, engine, fluids, suspension would be something between 1,000 to 1,500 pounds. And that would be assuming that the total car weight is closer to 3,000 pounds. So that's the car with all the body parts and the interior and whatever. Stripped down, it would be 1,000 to 1,500. So yeah, let's assume that we add a whole block that's the size of the entire car made of foam in weight to the car. That's negligible. We're talking about peanuts, okay? Now you might say, we added a lot of scrap metal to the car. And I might say, even though we removed the big chunk of the existing frame, you know, with the roof line and all that kind of stuff, and added more, which I think would have been the same, I'm just going to assume that we kept the entire frame intact and just add the weight of all the scrap metal from this screenshot. Again, according to a little bit of research, these shelves are about 14 pounds each. These flat skewers are about 4 to 8 pounds each. And these big blue bars, I think were about the same weight as the shelving. We'll say 14 for simplicity of math. And I did mention us buying 3 steel rods that are new for the roof line. Those were 8 pounds each. And even though we didn't use all of the metal, we had some scraps, I'm gonna count the entire lot as part of the weight added to the car. That would put us at about 100 pounds, maybe 120 pounds of metal. And if we were to add the foam, which we said was negligible from earlier, and we're gonna add the mesh, all the mesh that was added, perimeter of mesh on top of the car, let's say that the foam and the perimeter of mesh adds up to another 30 pounds, so we're at 150 pounds total. Now we're on to the Bondo, right? You're gonna be like, this stuff looks like a rock. It must be heavy like a rock, isn't it? What most people don't know, it's called lightweight body filler. This stuff is light AF. So again, to make the math easier, I'm going to be calculating how much Bondo weight we purchased, all right? Keep in mind that most of the Bondo that we applied onto the car was carved or sanded, like didn't actually make it onto the end product of the car. A lot of it was discarded. So we purchased 64 tubs of Bondo, and each tub was 8 pounds. So that puts us at 512 pounds of total Bondo added to the car. Now, let's say our torn down car, which was somewhere between 1,000 to 1,500 pounds, we're going to say is about 1,200, which I think is pretty fair. I like to think it's even less if you actually weigh it and count all the stuff that we discarded. And we've added about 600 pounds to it so far between the foam, the mesh, and the Bondo. Now, according to the internet and a little bit of chat GPT, the average interior of a car is about 100 pounds. Now, let's say even though our interior was very bare bones, we had nothing, it must have been a lot heavier because it was made from clay, fiberglass, and wood. So let's say that our interior is about 150 pounds. That should bring up our total to about 2,000 pounds, which for a car that size is actually pretty light. So yeah, to all the comments and everybody that said this car is a lot heavier, you're wrong. The car is actually about 1,000 pounds lighter than it was when we started with on a worst case scenario. Many comments were about the headlights, all right? The original Bugatti headlights have 4 thingies. I don't know what they're called. We'll call them thingies. And what we had was 3. Just like everything, hindsight is 20/20. The hole that we had for the headlights only fit 3 of the thingies that we had. Now, the dimensions of our hole is similar to what a Bugatti hole is. However, our thingies are, I guess, much bigger, so we just couldn't fit 4. We were supposed to put plexiglass so it's covered, but the edge never lined up. Basically, we had to just look at the light thingies before we made the hole for the headlights, and we probably would have had better looking headlights. It was an oversight. Comments about the hood and the engine. Yeah, you are correct. The hood is shut. You cannot access it. There are a couple main leads into the cabin that you can use to boost the car. And that's why the car is dead in all the other videos afterwards, as I assume nobody knows where the boost is. But, you know, if Steven, you gave me a call, I would have just told you. Like, whatever, man. Some comments about right-handed steering. And the only thing I could think of with that is some of the footage in the end is flipped, so they think it's right-hand drive, but no, it was a left-hand drive car. Copying Ryan Trahan? Really? Everybody uses that music now. Steven was a pioneer. Just saying. Well, Ryan Trahan is a pioneer, but Steven recognized that it is good and then started using it just like everybody else on YouTube. I'd be down to answer any more questions. You can feel free to leave them in the comments. Now that we're done with the comments, let's talk about the budget. So I'm not going to break down the budget in excruciating detail, but I will give you all the notable figures so that you can kind of have a rough idea of what happened. There's two budget documents, one for the first half of the project at the warehouse with Liam and Tyson, and one at the second warehouse with Ante, where we actually take it to the finish line. Now, the first budget I didn't create from scratch. Like I said, Liam was originally the producer, so a lot of these items maybe I could have done differently or whatever. The original estimate on that document was $50,000. Now, what we ended up spending was actually closer to $70,000 on the first part alone. To give you a bit more of a breakdown, $4,000 was spent on rent for the location. Steven had a rental, the Tesla that you see. He used that to get back and forth to the warehouse. Liam also had it a bunch of days. So it was $5,000 for the rental and about $750 for the supercharging costs for the month. $4,000 was spent on like food, snacks, and meals. $1,500 was spent on the G6 itself. And by the way, I still have the ownership and everything. $25,000 was spent on tools and materials. And about $30,000 was spent on labor. For part 2, we had a budget estimate of about $15,000 going into it. And we ended up spending closer to 16. Budget estimate for part 2 didn't include the location. So it was $15,000 to spend plus location, and what we ended up spending was 16 something, and that included the location. Those are the numbers. 15 estimated, we spent 16 something. So a couple of things, we didn't have a car rental this time. Steven was using his uncle's car to commute, and he also wasn't coming as often to this new location. He only came like a few times. So yeah, we spent $3,500 on location this round. We spent about $6K on labor. Now I don't have a breakdown of just the food like last time, but this time the food and the parts were together, but we didn't have tools. Food and parts, we spent $6,000 on that, and we spent about $850 in towing costs. So that brings up the total budget from both spreadsheets. Drum roll, please. $86,310.51. And by the way, that's Canadian dollars. So yeah, if we round up to 90K and we convert it according to the conversion rate of today to US dollars, we get something about $65,000, which is in both cases less than the $100,000 being claimed in the video. So yeah, there's that. In the end, what did we learn, you might ask? Nothing. This is just for me to look back on in 10 years. Bye.